When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. As part of the Global Medical Response family of companies, AMR is committed to its mission of providing care to the world at a moment's notice. As a leading 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
It's gonna be the year of politics. I don't know if I've ever seen a year like this. This is gonna be the biggest year of politics I can remember as a sentient adult.
It's going to be so messy. I love it.
Thanks for joining us on the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. I am Scott Lewis, the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. It is 2020, and I'm joined by managing editor Sara Libby. Hello, Sara.
Hello.
We are not joined by Andrew Keats.
No, the airport got him.
The airport murdered Andy Keats.
It always does.
I'm sorry. R.I.P. Andy Keats. The airport in Fort Worth, Texas, has murdered him.
We'll miss him.
He was a good writer. He was a fun guy. Even when we fought, I knew that our heart was in the right place.
Never has a reporter just taken a return flight and got to work normally.
No.
Never in 7 years of me being here has that ever happened.
And yet that doesn't stop the assurances that it will. Travel was rough for me as well. We drove from Salt Lake City to San Diego. We've done that drive a bazillion times. We knew not to do it on Sunday from Vegas to San Diego on Sunday is always a bit rough. But we tried this time because we thought for some reason in our head, like, it's Christmas time. Maybe it's not the same patterns. It was 5 hours from Salt Lake to Las Vegas. We screamed through Utah.
Okay.
Like Blade Runner.
Great. In a minivan.
9 hours from Vegas
Ugh.
to San Diego.
Ugh.
It almost broke us. My poor daughter was weeping, not just out of whiny, I want to get, no, just suffer.
Life is unendurable.
Yeah, I'm so sad. All right, but I hope everybody's all right. I hope you had a safe holiday. Happy New Year to everyone. We have a great show this week. Just Sara and I, we're going to talk about the latest updates in the mayor's race. We had an interesting little kerfuffle with Barbara Bree this week. AB5 is still a big deal. New York Times, lawsuits, a lot of information and discussion about that. Have you seen a state law sort of continue to flare like this?
It's been a while.
So we are going to break down what happened with that. And Sara and I have picked a couple things to talk about, to look forward to in 2020. But first, I wanted to say thank you to everyone. We appreciate all of you who have been listening. This has been a great year for listenership, for the live podcasts, and for donations. It means that a lot of you are coming back to the show for our take on news, and we just really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who donated. A lot of people joined our donation campaign, and it was awesome. I wanted to highlight a few podcast listeners who made the mention of the podcast on your donation. There's Spencer Katz out there who said he donated because of the most popular public affairs podcast recorded in downtown San Diego.
Spencer, this part of downtown San
Diego. Thank you, Spencer. Trip Sprague, who he said, I enjoy your podcast, and then something else, I just dotted that.
Okay.
And then Alejandro Pena, he said that we are the GOAT, actually the GOAT.
Okay.
In reporting and news coverage in San Diego. Thank you, Alejandro. So to everybody who donated out there were literally hundreds who came in the last few days. Thank you so much. The whole point of community-based reporting like this is that we are accountable to you all, and we get our independence and our strength through you all. So I appreciate it very much. And if you're worried you missed the campaign, don't. You can still give at voicesandiego.org/donate. All right. On the mayor's race. So every year I try to do a list of campaign social media ads and mailers that people give me. It gives a taste of how things are going out there.
Makes your office look great with
Yeah.
piles of
Piles of-
mailers.
If anybody needs some mailers over the last couple of years, just for reference, well, don't come to my office, but I guess I could produce one. So this week, Councilwoman Barbara Bree circulated an ad on Facebook somebody sent me. It congratulated Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, who was named the 2019 San Diegan of the Year by the Union Tribune. She was also one of our
Voice of
the Year mentions.
Yes.
And so Lucas O'Connor on Facebook sort of pointing this out. But, okay, the ad didn't start off with Weber's big accomplishment, though. The bill that she passed further defines when police can use lethal force and be punished for it. But the ad instead starts with, quote, this is from Barbara Bree, "I was the only mayoral candidate to cast a vote in support of Dr. Weber's use of force bill before it passed the legislature." Now, as Lucas pointed out and seemed pretty clear, that's just not true.
Yeah. First of all, it's weird to claim that you voted on something in the assembly when you're not in the assembly and your opponent is.
Right. She's on the city council. She voted for a resolution that
Right.
supported the bill.
Yes.
Okay, so Todd Gloria voted on the bill also in May of 2019
Yes.
when it was in the assembly. It was his first opportunity to vote on it,
Yes. It only went to one committee, which he was not on. So the first chance he had to vote on it was when it was before the full assembly.
which was late May, which was after Barbara Bree had supported the resolution for
Yes.
it. Now, there are other ways for somebody like Todd Gloria to say they support or not support something, and we don't necessarily know whether he actively made a point of that before. She says later, in response to my tweet, she said, "Just to set the record straight, I said I was the only mayoral candidate to, quote, support it from the beginning, and to actually cast a vote when I voted to support a city council resolution on May 14th. That's not what she said, though.
It's really easy to know that it's not what she said because it's in writing.
It's literally the ad that we took screenshots of. Facebook has an awesome ad archive if you ever want to go to it, an ads library. Search for all of this stuff. So I wrote back like, that's just not true. Like, he did vote for it. It didn't pass the Assembly and Senate until August. So the original take on your point just doesn't work. Like, it's wrong. So then they sent me a demand that I retract my tweet. Is that a tweet traction?
I think it is.
Because their point was that he supported a bill that had not yet, or that had been watered down in order to get the support of the police unions. Those are their words, watered down. So here's her congratulating
Shirley Weber.
Shirley Weber for this historic legislation
Yes.
that she later says was watered down.
Yes, that's a very interesting framing.
So, okay, it was watered down, and she wanted us to make, she said, like, it was irresponsible, and it demonstrates my bias that I didn't point out that he voted for a bill that had been watered down, and she supported the bill before it had been watered down. But that's not any context they included in their ad.
Right. I think if that's the point she wanted to make, it would be a decent one.
Sure, it's a fine one, but you didn't make it. That's not what you put in your ad.
Right.
So, like, it's not my fault I didn't include context that you didn't include.
Yeah,
in
it's
your
also
ad.
weird to say you should retract it because what I said was this other thing
Yeah.
that you didn't say.
So, needless to say, the responses stopped on that, but fascinating. But it kind of highlights these like intra-democratic scrums we're seeing, right? They have to find these things to build umbrage about, right? Like these almost like weird hair-splitting grievances.
Yes.
And is that the future of San Diego politics? Is two Democrats arguing about this stuff?
I think there are things on which they will continue to like fundamentally disagree, but this is such the opposite of that. It's like we both support this bill. We both love Shirley Weber. I just support it more than you and at a better time than you.
just to be clear, Shirley Weber endorsed Gloria.
Yes.
All right, so it's January 2nd, and a new law has taken effect, AB 5. It means that a lot of people who were considered independent contractors will now need to be made employees of the companies they were serving, or they may be cut off, or they might be fitting into some exemption in this new law, AB 5. All right? That is in effect, but it is hardly settled. Uber and Lyft and several other companies have filed lawsuits hoping for their own exemption or expressing grievance about not having an exemption in the law for their own businesses, which is odd because Uber made the claim pretty forcefully that it didn't apply to them. So it either applies and they need an exemption, or it doesn't apply and they need to not worry about it. But nonetheless, they are suing. At the heart of this firestorm, as she has been all year, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez was talk of the state again and made it into the New York Times. New York Times came in to talk about the complexity of the issue. So just to review, the Supreme Court last year passed or made a ruling on the Dynamex issue, which basically said, in short, that if you are doing work that a company does, if you're a baker at a bakery or a journalist at a newspaper, you have to be a employee. And if you're not, then you can have some of these exemptions. If you don't fit in, you got to be an employee. Now, the one they drew up for journalists in particular, which seemed to be the loudest crowd around about this, is it says that if you do more than 35 submissions a year, basically if you're doing something once a week, that's the kind of weekly columnist they're talking about, then you need to be an employee of that shop. So in our world, that seemed like a thing we could deal with, because at first we're like, oh no, freelancing's important. You and I have done freelancing our whole lives.
Yes.
It's how I broke into the industry. And so we're thinking want to make sure people can still freelance. So when they pass 35, okay, I can handle 35.
Yeah.
That gives people the opportunity. And yes, if you're doing something once a week, maybe you should be a part-time employee.
Yeah, that's a piece of the discussion that's often missing, is that you can be a part-time employee. And a lot of people have suggested that the only options are to either be an independent contractor or get hired full-time. And that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. And then they say, well, we like the flexibility. You can still be totally flexible on part-time.
Right.
Now, to be clear, if you go from being an independent contractor to being a part-time employee, there are added costs for the employer.
Definitely.
It's something like 15 to 20% in addition to what you're paying them. So it's not nothing. That's why these companies are so upset about it. If they add 15
there's workers' comp, there's Social Security, there's unemployment.
Right.
All of these benefits.
Yeah, hiring somebody adds that on. And so, when they do the calculus, it makes sense for some of these companies to spend $100 million opposing this law because it might cost them $300 million. All right. So that was a law that was passed, or a ruling that was passed, and this law that she did to sort of add these exemptions and other things onto it are what we're talking about with AB 5. Now, the New York Times came in, took a photo of Lorena Gonzalez. Was she at the airport?
I think she was. Also, I don't know if this is what you were about to get at, but I am pretty sure they used freelance photographers for all of the photos in that story.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, yeah, she's standing there kind of Wonder Woman style with her hands on her hips, and as defiant as she's always been. They characterized her as, they said, Miss Gonzalez, a progressive Democrat, has in recent weeks become a fierce Twitter presence, pushing back at critics, sometimes with profanity. It's a classic New York Times sentence. Let's break this one down.
Yeah. Well, first, the East Coast media took several weeks after AB 5 passed to notice that it existed. And then they were reporting like, hey, this law is a thing.
Kind of a big deal.
Everyone here already had been aware of for months. And now they have just learned that Lorena Gonzalez is active on Twitter and sometimes uses profanity. And they would like to communicate this to us.
Has in recent weeks. Hello. There might be no more entertaining feed than Lorena Gonzalez's feed over the last several years. Especially, by the way, when she fights with her daughter.
It's the best.
The other day, Tiara Gonzalez tweeted she's going to cover her body with tattoos. And she doesn't. She wants to do all 17 at one time. And you don't know if she's just trolling her mom at that point because her mom responds, "Please stop." She says, "No, I'm raising money. Here's my Venmo."
Oh, such good content.
It's such good content. All right. It continues. When asked about some of Ms. Gonzalez's tweets, a spokeswoman said by email, quote, "The Assemblywoman is incredibly angry at an economic system that has caused a permanent underclass in her community of working men and women who are constantly being squeezed by corporate greed." She's just so passionate.
Man.
So AB5 continues. Now, there are two fronts that this is going to play out. One is the court.
Yes.
Will the court step in somehow? Now, it would be odd because the court is what started this.
Yes.
Now, maybe the contention, I think, is that some of the exemptions that were provided were themselves exclusionary to the point of actually indicating some First Amendment or other unfairness
there have been
decisions, right?
Yes, so there have been 3 lawsuits so far, and interestingly, they have each made different arguments about why AB5 is improper or unconstitutional, and they've all been filed in federal court, whereas the decision that set it in motion is in the state Supreme Court. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
And I would also argue that there's a third front, which is the legislature itself, where, Republicans are going to be trying to turn it over or change it in certain ways. And Lorena Gonzalez herself has said she's open to continuing to tweak it and refine it.
Yeah, and you heard from Assemblywoman Melissa Melendez, a Republican, who says she's inundated with email.
Yes, a lot of Republicans have been really fired up about trying to overturn or change AB5. Marie Waldron from Escondido brings it up all the time and says, like, hey, the Democrats did this. Don't blame us.
So the question is, will they tweak it next year? She's already hinted at compromises she might do where you just label freelance journalists as businesses and businesses can sell business services to other people, all those kinds of things. And then the other is the ballot box.
Yes.
Uber has already threatened, and these other companies have already threatened to put something on the ballot box, but it might only apply to their companies. Mm-hmm. And so would leave all these other people in a state of uncertainty. So fascinating, continuing discussion going on there. Stay tuned. We will follow it, obviously local in implications, but also local in the leadership that's causing it. So a fascinating discussion. Stop there. One of the not so secrets about running this operation is that we take weekends off. Mm-hmm. We try to do major holidays. We don't consider ourselves like the paper of record that has to follow if a water main breaks or something on Christmas Day.
Yeah, I worked for Politico when the shoe bomber happened on Christmas Day. It was like, ugh.
So we try to pack in this week, in this sort of interregnum between 2019 and 2020, this discussion, all these discussions about what happened over the last year and what to look forward to. And so now it's 2020. You and I are going to talk about a few things we are looking forward to. Here's a thing. In 30 days, ballots are going out to the people for the March primary.
That's nuts.
That's nuts, right?
Yeah.
30 days from now. Or this is when we're recording. So that's not a month. So a lot of things. I would say the first thing I'm looking forward to is the March primary. It's going to be a big election.
Yeah.
So, and shout out to a guy, by the way, Darren Smith. He's been hosting a show on Kogo now called Not Sports. He's been a sports guy for a long time. He's one of the best interviewers in town, and to have him involved in discussion about local politics and stuff is great. Anyway, he had me review the year and the year coming up. And I think people are kind of underestimating the power of this primary. We're going to have presidential campaigns start coming through.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Mayor Pete, former Mayor
Bernie
Pete.
Sanders has an office in Orange County.
Really?
Like, what a world this is.
And so they're all coming in. It's going to be huge. Then there's these 2 ballot measures.
Mm-hmm.
3, the Newland Sierra and the Stop Backcountry Development, those 2, A and B. And then the third one on raising the hotel room tax in the city of San Diego.
Yes.
And then we're going to finally whittle down all these council races. There's 5 open San Diego City Council seats. That means there's like 40 candidates running that'll all get whittled down to 2 finalists for each one, 10 candidates. We'll still have to go through all 10.
Let's do it.
Let's do it, right?
Let's get in there.
And then, the presidential race, Congress, county supervisor, school board.
It's going to be so messy. I love it.
It's going to be the year of politics. I don't know if I've ever seen a year like this. This is going to be the biggest year of politics I can remember as a sentient adult.
Bananas.
All right. So that's the first one I would highlight. What about you?
So mine is not political,
Really?
nor is it local,
Fantastic.
but it is a thing I love, and it is the Olympics,
Oh, right.
and it's coming. And I know that a lot of people, I want to say a lot of men, like, fancy themselves like, oh, I could be like a sports broadcaster, like George Costanza.
Sure.
I could be the Olympic track commentator. I just want everyone out there to know
In
it's
case
never
there's
going to happen.
a producer listening or something.
But I'm really good.
Where are the Olympics this year?
They're in Tokyo.
Oh, okay. It's not, when's LA? Like
It's
32 or something?
8 years, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm really down. It's such a good antidote in the middle of a presidential year because it's like, just unifying and inspirational stories and people coming together.
That's a good one.
I love them. I love them so much.
It is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch with your kids. It's nice to have something to watch every night that's like a little different.
Yes.
Ah, cool. So track and field?
Track and field. I also love swimming and gymnastics.
The big
3.
The best thing about the Summer Olympics is that they're actually like all races where multiple people are running or pushing themselves against the other people.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's a good one. Andy is not here, so I'm going to do one for him. He posted a piece today, or you did for him, about the future of the Republican Party in San Diego. Now, we talked about this in a recent episode, but the actual piece is up now, and I think it's really good. There's a lot of significant comments in there. He talked to local Republicans, statewide guy, also Mike Madrid, about what's going to happen, how they're going to handle what is. It's got to be in their, at least part of their discussion, as a crisis. It's got to be thought of as a crisis for the party. Like they are losing people who are elected officials right now. They're not in contested races. They're just defecting from the party, and not just like city council people in like small cities. We're talking about a city councilman in San Diego, the district attorney, one of the 3 or 4 countywide elected officials, a state assemblyman, and
multiple state assemblymen.
Yeah, and it just keeps going, and some consultants here and there, stuff like that. So, does the party have a future? I think there was a really interesting discussion in his piece. And so, first off, Jen Jacobs, a longtime Republican strategist, we've had her on the show before, kind of based in North County, San Diego. She said that the first and foremost thing over the next 12 months is maintaining the majority on the Board of Supervisors. She called it, at this point, the holy grail for the Republican Party right now. And so just lay that out for a second. She's talking about the seat that Kristen Gaspar has. That's the District 3 County Supervisor seat, which represents the North Coastal area of the county. Republican right now. It's if that falls and District 1 goes to a Democrat, which it almost certainly will, then that means Democrats will have a majority on the County Board of Supervisors for the first time any of us remember. That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
So, but then she said something else that was really interesting, and this is kind of really highlights the tension in the party right now. She said, from a grassroots standpoint, it is possible the most energetic and involved Central Committee in California. That doesn't happen anywhere else in California, and it definitely doesn't happen at the San Diego Democratic Party. So her point was like, you go to these Central Committee meetings, and they are rousing rallies for the Republican Party.
Yeah, this is a point that Tony Kravaric makes all the time, is that the crowds are standing room only, and people are very, very energized and into it, the people who are there.
Right. And so, yeah, Kravaric is the chairman of the Republican Party in San Diego. He's maintained that spot. And yeah, he does have a bullish take on everything going on. But that's represents kind of a conundrum. And Mike Madrid, he's been a fierce critic of his own party statewide, and especially of Kravaric, in that he says that's actually a symptom of the problem, that the party has adopted a narrowing ideology, which has been good for the base enthusiasm, but bad at winning elections.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to have two departing takes on that dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we also talked to, or Andy also talked to Jason Rowe, who's running Gaspar's campaign. He said that he kind of found what he thinks is a gift. He said this is a gift. And that was that an early poll in the district found 28% of the residents listed roads, traffic, and infrastructure as a significant concern. And then the San Diego's voice of the year, as far as we were concerned, Hassan Akrada, made his big point about shifting remaining funds from the tax that we collect here for to transit projects instead of highway projects. And so he's like, look, we found our issue. We can build a party movement out of. This is a gift. And opposing that sort of investment in transit will deliver the goods.
Yeah, it's sort of the same take that Carl DeMaio had in 2018 in trying to oppose the gas tax. I mean, maybe it will work better for them in a seat that's more concentrated and maybe more likely to lean Republican to begin with, as opposed to the state as a whole, but it sure didn't work out as a statewide issue.
Yeah. I heard from Ryan Klumpner after the piece ran. He's in the post talking about his view on the party and such, and he said he actually has polling from the same area, from the same race, that shows roads and infrastructure in single digits behind homelessness, the cost of housing, and climate change as bigger issues. So, that's some disagreement about whether that really is the sort of fantasy gift that he's talking about. So I think I keep harping on this because I really think it's fascinating. There's like this crossroads we're at as a community. Are we heading towards where a world where people choose between Democrats, a more conservative Democrat or a more liberal Democrat going forward, or are we going to find a new version of the Republican Party or some sort of third party that takes that right of center energy? There's still right of center energy, so who will own that? And it feels like the fight is that we're literally at the crossroads now, where it either goes to some Democrat, dominated system, or to some sort of new thing that the Republicans come up with or somebody else comes up with, but it's not happening yet.
No, it seems like they've been trying to come up with that new thing, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Mark Kerseys and the Chad Mays of the world, and it still has not taken off.
Yeah, he literally didn't Chad Mays hold a conference this summer called like the Third Way or something like that?
Yeah, he and Arnold Schwarzenegger have this group, New Way California, I think. New Way, Third Way.
So far, the first thing to come out of that is that he's leaving the party.
Exactly.
Okay, that was Chad Mays. He came to PolitiFest. He represents what, like Palm Springs?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, fascinating. All right, so I have one. I wrote about it in my own little, I guess it wasn't so little, column. Every year I try to do a New Year's Eve or a New Year's column, and I've only been able to do it a few times because the end of the year is so crazy for us usually. This time I got it together, and I ended up, I think about the 2020 come forward, and the one thing that kept coming to mind was the car.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like San Diego's heading into a year where we're going to talk about the car all the time, like constantly. Okay, so my question is, what was your first car?
Oh, it was a 92 Mustang convertible, which sounds cool, except it was the 1 year or two that Mustangs were actually really heinous looking.
Yeah, there was that early 90s period where Mustangs just weren't that cool looking. Like they looked like Ford Focuses or something. Like they didn't have that same distinct like coolness.
Yeah. I mean,
so
like thank you. Like a 65 Mustang looks great.
Was it fast
newer
as hell
Mustangs,
though?
No, it was bad. It sounds cool, and I assure you it was not.
Because you could only fit like one friend in too, right?
Yeah.
So mine was a pickup truck, and I tell the story about how I killed that truck.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in that story, check it out. But my point is like I and you grew up with the car. The car is a part of our life.
Desperately wanting a car.
Yeah, desperately wanting it. Building lives around it in the Western United States where we both grew up, like it's impossible to have pictured living any other way.
No.
And yet traveling to places, you lived in DC, I lived in Madrid, I lived in other places like where you didn't have to, and it changes things. Makes you realize there are other ways things can work.
Yes.
And it feels like that same sort of tension or discussion going on about like, is it possible to ever live in San Diego without a car? And if not, what does that mean for the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing here? California has tons of jobs, tons of money, but the cost of living here is out of control. And it's driven mostly by housing prices, but housing prices are driven mostly by the car, like the land use that we've built around housing and how scarce we've made it because there's nowhere else to build because we filled up all the places you can drive to.
It's going to be crazy.
So I think there's not only an actual tax about transit, probably on the November ballot. There's going to be a tax in March, the hotel room tax that is in part about roads, and then there's going to be constant discussions about all these housing projects, whether it's far-flung sprawl developments or whether it's discussions about parking, storage requirements,
bike lanes.
Yes, parking on the streets, bike lanes, these, how we're going to do community plan, zoning, all kinds of things. So I think that 2020 is going to be the year of the car in San Diego. I don't think we resolve anything at the end, but I think that, and look, a lot of people are going to say like, I'm not giving up my car, from my cold dead head. Fine.
Right.
What we're talking about is like, can other people, especially people who are treading water at the poverty line, can they live without a car? Can we figure out a way that they don't have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 a year or whatever it is, maintaining, storing, insuring, and fueling a car?
Yeah, or even can a family get by with having one car?
Right. So that was my big one, 2020. All right. Well, hopefully Andy actually comes back from the dead next week.
I miss him.
He didn't actually die, for what it's worth. Probably
be awful cavalier about it if he did.
Very macabre way to discuss that. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast, the most popular public affairs podcast recorded in this little area of downtown San Diego. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletters. Andy and I write each week one called The Politics Report, comes out on Saturdays. Sarah's What We Learned This Week had some great book recommendations last week.
Oh, thanks.
I bought one.
Oh, great.
Off of that. A little gift card I had to cash in. Thank you. But she's always summing up the week well and adding a little hot lava take.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes burns my fingers on the Sunday morning when I'm reading it. All right. And that comes out every Sunday. Find those in the show notes or go to vosd.org/newsletters. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and editor-in-chief. Andrew Keats is assistant editor. Sarah Libby's managing editor. And this show is produced by Nate John Megan Wood and Adriana Hildes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.